So you're prepping your car after the season, maybe for the first time. One thing you want to take a close look at is your bolt lengths. And yeah, I know, sounds super random and kind of like a waste of time.
But save time, more success.
Does it save time though? Because we've been here for about an hour.
But I promise this tip will help you decrease wear and reduce the chances of breaking shit leaving you stranded somewhere. There's two main things you want to look at. The first is that you're getting the proper thread engagement. Too little thread engagement and the few threads that are holding everything together can get ripped apart. Too long of a bolt, especially in a blind hole, can mean that you bottom out long before the head of the bolt is able to clamp the component that you're trying to hold in place, allowing everything to bounce around and eventually rip apart. Now, depths may vary from application to application, but in an ideal situation, that engagement is 3 times the diameter when going into aluminum and 1.5 times the diameter when going into steel. Oh, and always remember to torque important hardware. The second thing you want to keep an eye out for is the shoulder or the grip length. Now the grip is the unthreaded or the smooth portion of the bolt, and when using a bolt to secure a component like a shock, tie rod, or control arm, you want that grip to be what's in contact with the tabs or the adjacent component. And speaking of shocks, since we're talking about shock bolts, now would be a great time to bring up our suspension sliders. Are you tired of your stock sliders cracking or making noise? These shock sliders have a 3-piece design with the outside layer being a hard anodized 6061 aluminum and the inside a yummy gooey center like a candy bar. That is, if a candy bar could withstand extreme temperatures and won't wear out the threads of your shock. Ditch those noisy stock sliders and get your AGM suspension sliders today. Or said another way, you want the grip of the bolt to be what's in shear, not the threads. You do this because the grip has more surface area than the threads. So not only is there more contact to the tab or the other components, that solid surface holds up to the constant abuse you put your poor hardware through, better than the threads do. This is because threads have space between them, and as they're repeatedly beat against the bore they're in, while you're out there doing it for the gram,
Oh my God.
the thread material is able to push into the spaces on either side of it, reducing the diameter of the bolt, making it more loose in the bore and allowing more wear. The more wear, the smaller the OD of the bolt, and the smaller the OD of the bolt, the more wear, and around we go until the bolt's smashed and the hole's ovaled out. So whenever possible, fit bolts so the grip is what's in shear between the component and the tabs. A quick side note, what you want to make sure you absolutely do not do is have the very first thread of the bolt as what is in shear. This is the weakest part of the bolt, so you want to make sure that that is for sure beyond the tab. In a situation like this, you may actually have a little bit extra grip poking out. That's easy to hide with just a pair of washers. This is also important because you don't want to tighten the nut all the way down to the very first thread. You want to have some threads that are below the level of this washer because again, this is the weakest point of the bolt, so you're trying to protect that area. Now, if you're not using aircraft hardware, this often means you're going to have to cut a bolt to length. And that's because when you find a bolt with the correct grip length, you'll often find that the bolt is too long with all its threads. For cut lengths, we normally like to see 3 or 4 threads out beyond the end of the nut once everything's installed, but everyone's a bit different. To cut a bolt, you can use a lathe, bandsaw, cutoff wheel, or hacksaw. Really anything that's not going to put an excessive amount of heat into the bolt so it doesn't adversely affect its hardness. So mark your distance on your bolt, and if you're using a bandsaw, cutoff wheel, or hacksaw, thread a nut onto the bolt. That way when you clamp it in the vise, you're not damaging the threads or the grip. After you've cut the bolt at the mark you made, you can unthread the nut. You'll notice by unthreading the nut, you're also cleaning up the threads as that comes off. The last bit we like to do is sand a chamfer on the cut edge of the bolt. Now this makes it even easier to install, and it ensures that you don't take a chunkier skin off the next time you brush past this bolt. To recap, make sure you got the right thread engagement, make sure to get those grip lengths right, and use a nut when you cut your bolts. Oh, and here's a bonus. Whenever possible, torque your hardware from the nut side. This way, all your force is put into achieving the correct torque, instead of losing some of it. Whenever possible, torque your hardware from the nut side. This way, all your force is put into achieving the correct torque, instead of some of it being lost to the friction of a rotating bolt inside a loaded bore. And that's it. If you have any quick tips of your own, we'd love to hear them in the comments below. Please consider subscribing, and if you would, share this quick tip with your friends.